The desert wind blew hard outside the army base, covering the windows in dust. Inside a dark room, 5 men sat around a wooden table, faces tight, eyes tired. The air smelled like old coffee and secrets. A radio crackled to life and a voice came through, low and cold. Target identified, female, mid-30s, location confirmed. Prepare for elimination. No one spoke for a few seconds. Then Captain Jonas sighed and looked at the file in front of him. A photo was paper-clipped to the top. A woman with kind eyes. Her name written below, Sofia Mendez. She's a teacher, right? One soldier asked quietly. Humanitarian. Another one said. Helps build schools, feeds children. Writes about war crimes. Daniel, the pilot, stared at the picture longer than the others. He had flown hundreds of missions, but this one didn't feel right. Why is she the target? He asked, his voice calm but heavy. Classified, Captain Jonas answered, sliding the folder shut. We follow orders, not feelings. The order was clear. Extract the woman from the village. Fly her out to sea and push her from the helicopter. No questions. No records. No witnesses. They were told she was a threat to national peace, that she had seen too much, but none of it made sense. Daniel walked out of the room holding the flight plan in his hand. He stood under the open sky, his eyes scanning the mountains far away. Somewhere out there, a woman who taught children and planted trees was now marked to die. Back inside, the other men began preparing the gear. Marek, the youngest of the squad, checked the comms unit and hesitated. She's not a criminal, he muttered to himself. She's not the enemy, but still he followed orders like always. Because saying no in this place was more dangerous than jumping from the helicopter yourself. Sofia, meanwhile, sat on the porch of a small house in the village of El Nido. She had just given medicine to a sick child and was writing in her notebook. In her mind, she had no enemies. Only people to help. She didn't know that far away. Her photo was being passed around like a death sentence. At sunset, the helicopter blades roared to life. Shaking the dust from the ground, the team moved quickly. Dressed in black, faces covered. Daniel sat in the cockpit, his hands steady on the controls. But his heart uneasy. They lifted off, heading for the village like shadows in the sky. It was a 45-minute flight, mostly silent. Except for the soft sound of the radio. Daniel kept checking the signal, half hoping someone would call to cancel the mission. No one did. The closer they got, the heavier the air felt inside the helicopter. No one spoke. Even Jonas looked pale now. As they approached the village, Sofia looked up at the sound of the chopper. She thought help had finally come last week. She had sent a message to the embassy, asking for evacuation due to increasing danger in the area. She believed this helicopter was the answer. She waved at it, smiling, not knowing this would be the last time she'd wave at anyone. They landed near the school, and the team moved fast. Sofia Mendez? Jonas asked, pretending to be from a rescue team. Yes, she said, is this from the embassy? He nodded, lying. Come with us, quickly. It's not safe here. She grabbed her small bag, hugged a crying child goodbye, and followed the soldiers. The villagers didn't question it. They trusted uniforms as the helicopter lifted again. Sofia looked down at the place she had called home for 3 years. She felt a little sad, but mostly relieved. In the back of the helicopter, she sat between Marek and another soldier. Daniel glanced at her through the mirror, their eyes meeting for a brief second. She gave him a polite smile. He turned away, feeling sick. 10 minutes into the flight, Jonas gave the hand signal. Marek hesitated, his hands shaking. Do it, Jonas whispered. Now. Daniel's voice came through the headset. Altitude 900 feet, heading northeast. Marek stood up, grabbed Sofia by the arms. What are you doing? She cried, her smile gone, her face white with fear. She struggled, but the soldiers were stronger. Then, and with no words spoken, on they threw her. She screamed as she disappeared into the black sky. Her bag fell after her, spinning like a dying bird. Silence followed, except for the sound of the wind. Then, through the comms, a voice came through again. Mission complete, it said coldly, but no one knew who had spoken. And Daniel felt a chill crawl down his spine. The night sky stretched endless and dark, the helicopter slicing through it like a ghost. Inside, the men sat in heavy silence, their faces hidden behind masks. But their eyes spoke louder than words. Only the sound of the blades filled the air, a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat, cold and mechanical. Sophia sat near the window, her hands folded on her lap, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and confusion. She didn't understand why no one was talking. Usually rescue teams asked questions, gave water, offered comfort. But these men acted like statues frozen in their seats. Her gut whispered something was wrong, but she pushed the thought away. She wanted to believe she was finally safe. Daniel, the pilot, kept his eyes on the horizon. His hands were steady on the controls, but his mind was a storm. Every minute that passed felt heavier. He thought about his daughter back home. Same age as Sophia, same brown eyes. What if someone did this to her, he wondered. What if orders told him to hurt someone who didn't deserve it? Captain Jonas sat in the corner, checking his watch again and again. He didn't like this mission either. But years of service had taught him one thing. Feelings get you killed. When the radio came alive, everyone froze. A voice said, "Change route. Take the east path over the river. Confirm status of target." Jonas replied, "Target secured." There was a pause, then the voice came again. "Proceed with disposal." That word hit Daniel like a punch. Disposal, not rescue. Not transport and disposal. His throat went dry. He looked at Sophia through the reflection in the glass. She was humming softly to herself, a quiet tune. Maybe to calm her heart, maybe to remind herself she was still alive. Marek, sitting beside her, felt the same twisting guilt. He couldn't even look at her anymore. When she smiled and asked, "Will we reach the base soon?" he only nodded, because if he spoke, his voice would break. The helicopter crossed over a deep jungle. Below them, the trees looked like waves of green darkness. Jonas tapped Daniel's shoulder and gave the final signal. It was time. Daniel didn't move, he just stared ahead, pretending he didn't hear. "Marek," Jonas said louder this time. The young soldier hesitated, his lips trembling. "I can't," he whispered. "She's not an enemy." Jonas glared at him. "You have no choice," he turned to the others. "Do it." Two men stood up, grabbing Sophia by the arms. She screamed in panic, "What are you doing?" "Where are we going?" Her voice cracked in fear. Daniel's chest tightened. He couldn't look anymore. "Wait," Sophia cried. "Please, I helped your people, I saved children, what did I do wrong?" But her words were swallowed by the roar of the blades. She fought hard, kicking, crying, begging. But one push was all it took, and she was gone. Disappearing into the endless black below, Daniel's hands shook on the controls. He almost pulled the helicopter around, but Jonas's voice stopped him. "Keep your course, pilot." Daniel didn't answer. He could barely breathe. For a moment no one spoke. Then, through the static, came a voice on the comms. Calm, mechanical. "Mission complete," Jonas nodded once. But Marek's face went pale because the voice that said it didn't belong to anyone inside the helicopter. "Who said that?" Daniel asked quietly. No one answered. He checked his comm panel. The source was untraceable. A chill spread through the cabin. No one dared to say it aloud. But they all felt it. The voice sounded like Sophia's. Jonas broke the silence. "Erase the recording. No one mentions this, understood?" Everyone nodded. But Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. He looked down through the window, but the jungle was a sea of darkness. No light, no sound, no proof she was gone. When they landed back at the base, the air felt heavier than before. Jonas went straight to the commanding office to file the report. Marek sat outside the hangar, his head in his hands, whispering to himself. Daniel walked away from the helicopter and stared at the horizon. He felt like the wind itself was whispering her name. Later that night, as Daniel tried to sleep, his radio flickered on by itself at first. He thought it was a malfunction. But then, through the static, he heard something faint, a voice. Weak but clear. "I'm still here," it said. Daniel sat up, heart pounding. He turned the radio off, then back on. Nothing, just silence again. But that one whisper refused to leave his mind. He kept hearing it every time he closed his eyes. He knew what he had heard, and deep down he prayed that somehow it was true, that she was still alive somewhere in that jungle. Breathing, fighting, waiting, because if she was, Then this mission wasn't complete, not yet. The next morning came heavy and gray. Clouds sat low over the base as if the sky itself carried guilt. Daniel hadn't slept all night. The whisper from the radio kept echoing in his mind. "I'm still here," it had said, soft but sharp enough to slice through his thoughts. He told himself it was just his imagination. Maybe interference, maybe static. But something deep inside refused to believe that. Because in that voice, there was breath, pain, and life. Not machine noise. Not a glitch, it was human. When Daniel entered the hangar, Marek was already there, sitting on an empty fuel drum. Staring at nothing, he looked broken. "Couldn't sleep?" Daniel asked quietly. Marek shook his head. "I keep hearing her scream," he whispered. "I can't stop it," Daniel said nothing. Only handed him a cup of coffee. It was cold, but it was something. Then the base radio crackled again. A message came through, not from command, but from a field surveillance post. "Unidentified heat signature detected in Sector 4 near River Junction," the operator said. Jonas entered the hangar at that exact moment and froze. He glanced at Daniel and Marek, his expression unreadable. "Probably an animal," Jonas said quickly. Nothing else could have survived that fall. But his voice lacked its usual iron tone. He sounded unsure. Daniel frowned. "Sector 4. That was right under the flight path where Sophia had fallen. Coincidence? Maybe. But after last night, he didn't believe in coincidences anymore." Jonas barked orders to delete the recording and ignore the report. "Command doesn't want loose threads," he said. "We follow protocol." Then he left, but Marek didn't move. He stared at the radio like it was a ghost. "What if she's alive?" he whispered. "What if she's hurt and waiting for us?" Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he walked out of the hangar, his boots crunching against the gravel. He looked up at the mountains in the distance, covered in fog. If she was down there, then she was alone. Bleeding, scared, he clenched his jaw. He had followed orders his whole life. But maybe it was time to follow something else. His conscience. Meanwhile, miles away in the jungle below, Sophia lay between tangled roots, her body weak, her arm broken, her face cut, every breath hurt, but she was alive. Rain dripped through the leaves, washing blood from her hair. She tried to move but screamed in pain a few minutes later. Footsteps approached, soft and unsure. A local villager named Mateo found her lying there, half conscious. He had heard the helicopter at night and followed the sound of the fall. He knelt beside her, checking her pulse. "You're alive," he whispered, shocked. "By God, you're alive." He carried her to his small hut by the river. Wrapping her in blankets, Sophia drifted in and out of sleep. Each time she opened her eyes, she saw Mateo's worried face in the flickering firelight. "You fell from the sky," he told her, shaking his head. "But you didn't die. Maybe the sky still wants you here." Sophia tried to speak, but only one word came out. "Why?" Back at the base, Daniel sat inside the comms room alone. He turned on the radio again, tuning to the same frequency used during the mission. Static filled the air, white noise. Endless and cold, he leaned closer, closing his eyes. Then it came again, faint, broken, like a ghost speaking through wind. "Help," the voice said. Then silence. Daniel's heart raced. He checked the signal map. It came from the direction of Sector 4. He wrote down the coordinates quickly. Marek entered the room just then and saw the map. "You're not thinking what I think you're thinking," Marek said, his voice trembling. Daniel looked up, his expression calm but fierce. "She's out there," he said, "and we're going to find her." That night, while the base slept, Daniel and Marek loaded the chopper quietly. They took a small medical kit, water, and a field tracker. No lights, no authorization, no backup. When Daniel started the engine, the rotor sound seemed louder than ever. "Are we really doing this?" Marek asked. Daniel nodded. "She didn't deserve to die. And neither will our souls if we fix this." They flew low, below radar range, the moonlight silvering the treetops. Every few minutes, Daniel checked the signal. It was still there. Then after 30 minutes, the tracker blinked red. The signal was close, maybe within a kilometer. They landed in a clearing and began walking through thick vines and mud. Marek's flashlight flickered in the darkness. "Daniel," he whispered, "what if command finds out?" Then we'll tell them we were following the voice, Daniel said with a half smile. The one they all ignored. When they reached the riverbank, Daniel saw something that made his heart stop. A small fire was burning, and beside it, a figure wrapped in cloth. Barely moving, he rushed forward. "Sophia?" he whispered. The figure lifted her head weakly, her eyes meeting his. For a moment, everything went still. Even the jungle seemed to hold its breath. He fell to his knees beside her, his throat tight. "You're alive," he whispered, his voice breaking. Sophia smiled faintly, her lips pale. "I told you," she said softly. "Mission not complete," then she passed out. Daniel looked at Marek, who was frozen in disbelief. The young soldier whispered, "We just became the enemies of our own command." Daniel nodded slowly. "Maybe," he said. "But at least we became human again." Rain poured hard outside the small wooden hut, tapping on the roof like tiny fists from heaven. Inside, Sophia lay on a thin mat, her body wrapped in old blankets, her arm in a rough sling made from torn cloth. Her lips were dry, her ribs hurt with every breath, and her legs felt like stones. But she was alive, barely, but alive. She opened her eyes slowly, blinking at the orange light from the fire. The room spun for a moment, and then the smell of boiled herbs brought her back. An old woman stood nearby, grinding roots in a bowl, while Mateo, the man who found her, sat by the door, watching the rain. "You're awake," he said gently, turning toward her. "You've been sleeping for 2 days." Sophia tried to speak, but only a dry whisper came out. Mateo helped her sip warm water from a wooden cup. Her lips trembled. "Why, help me." "You fell from the sky," he said simply. "But the earth refused to swallow you." Mateo wasn't a soldier or a doctor, just a farmer with a kind heart and quiet courage. He and his mother, the old healer, had taken Sophia in without asking questions. They cleaned her wounds, fed her soup, and prayed that whatever ghosts followed her wouldn't find their home. Each day Sophia fought to move. Her left leg was swollen, her back bruised black and blue, but slowly, painfully, she sat up, then crawled, then stood with help. Every muscle screamed. But her will was louder. She started writing again. Using a piece of charcoal on palm leaves, she wrote what happened. The rescue that was really a death order. The betrayal in the sky. The voice on the comms. Each word hurt her fingers. But each sentence gave her strength. Her body was broken, but her soul was sharpening like a blade. Back at the military base, Daniel sat in his room, reading Sophia's hospital report in silence. He had used his connection with a civilian doctor to get her checked privately in a town far from the base. The X-ray showed fractures, dislocation, and blood loss, but no internal damage. She should be dead, the doctor had said. It's a miracle she's even speaking. Daniel didn't believe in miracles, but now he was starting to believe in Sophia. She hadn't just survived the fall. She had survived the lie. Marek entered the room, holding a data chip in his shaking hand. "I found something," he whispered. "You need to see this." They plugged the chip into Daniel's private laptop. It was flight data, but not just the basic report. Hidden deep inside was a second audio log, one that hadn't been sent to command. The voice was clear, Jonas's voice, talking before the mission. "She knows about the arms deal," Jonas said. "We can't let her reach the embassy." Daniel froze. He paused the audio and stared at Marek. "She wasn't a threat to the country," he said slowly. "She was a threat to their secrets." The pieces fell into place. Sophia had found out about illegal weapons being moved through war zones. She had seen documents, taken photos, maybe even contacted someone at the embassy. And someone up high wanted her silenced before the truth got out. Daniel stood up, gripping the edge of the table. "We were used," he said bitterly. "We weren't saving the country. We were cleaning up someone else's crime." That night, he contacted an old journalist friend named Lara. She had exposed war crimes before, and Daniel trusted her more than anyone in uniform. He sent her Sophia's name, the audio file, and coordinates to the village. Then he smashed the chip to pieces. Meanwhile, in the jungle hut, Sophia took her first steps without help. She cried from the pain but smiled at the same time. Her spine felt like glass. Her knees shook, but she moved forward, one step, then another, then one more. Mateo watched silently, tears in his eyes. You are stronger than iron, he said. Even the jungle has bowed to your will. Sophia nodded. But her eyes burned not with pride, with purpose. She had more than bones to fix, and she had a truth to deliver. She began recording videos with Mateo's old phone. Speaking in short, clear messages, she told the world what happened. Without names, just her voice and her eyes. Her face still bore bruises, her voice still cracked, but her message was steady. I was marked to die, but I lived. And now I will speak. The videos were uploaded quietly using a hidden signal in the village. One by one they began to spread, first to local news blogs, then to human rights channels, then to the world. At the base, Jonas saw the footage on a news screen, and his face went white. The soldier he had ordered thrown from the sky was now speaking to millions. The mission wasn't buried, it was being reborn. Sophia's body had refused to die. Now her words were about to do what bullets could not, break the silence, and this time no one would stop her. The video spread faster than wildfire. First, it was just a few anonymous blogs sharing Sophia's story. Then it reached journalists, human rights groups, and finally the evening news. Her bruised face appeared on millions of screens. Her voice calm, her message direct. I was marked for death by people who wear the same flag I once trusted. At the military base, silence fell like a curtain. Soldiers turned their heads when Daniel walked by. Jonas disappeared into meetings behind closed doors. Command denied everything, calling the video fake, calling Sophia a rebel, a liar, a ghost. But ghosts don't bleed. And Sophia had bled for the world to see. Marek sat alone in the barracks, shaking as he read the online comments. People were furious, demanding answers. And the worst part? Someone had leaked names. His name, Daniel's name. Even the code name of the mission, Operation Quiet Wind. He scrolled down and saw a photo of himself, taken from the base's security camera. His hands began to sweat. I didn't push her, he whispered to no one. I didn't touch her, but it didn't matter. He had been there, he had watched. And the world didn't care about small differences. They only saw monsters in uniform. Daniel received a call from an unknown number. A deep voice spoke fast. They know you helped her, it said. You're not safe. Walk away now before you lose everything. Daniel hung up without replying. He stood by the window watching the sky, the same sky where she had fallen, and lived in another room. Sergeant Blake stared at the wall. He was one of the men who had held Sophia's arms before she was thrown. He hadn't slept in days, he drank too much, talked too little that night. He packed a small bag, left his badge on his bed, and vanished into the dark. No one saw him leave, no one knew where he went. Only Marek found a note under Blake's pillow. 4 words written in messy pen. I heard her voice. The news reached Jonas quickly. He slammed his fist on the desk, shouting orders. Find Blake, shut this down. Control the story. But control was slipping through his fingers like sand, because the more they denied the truth, the louder the truth echoed. A reporter named Lara, Daniel's old friend, released a full article. It had the leaked audio of Jonas speaking about the arms deal. It had photos of Sophia's injuries confirmed by doctors, and it had one more thing, a witness. Unnamed, who confessed everything. Jonas knew it was Marek. He had seen the guilt tearing the boy apart. He called him in, sat him down, and stared into his soul. You've ruined lives, Jonas said coldly. Marek looked down, his voice barely a whisper. We ruined her first. Daniel, meanwhile, had moved Sophia to a safe location in the mountains. She was walking more now, still slow but stronger. Every day, she received letters from people around the world. Messages of support, apologies and prayers. Some were from other whistleblowers, some from soldiers who said they were sorry. One letter came without a name. Just one sentence, I couldn't stop them. But I never forgot your scream. She folded that letter gently, placed it inside her notebook and closed it. Then she looked at Daniel, who had just returned from the village. They're starting to turn on each other, he said. Sophia nodded. Guilt is a slow poison, she whispered. But it always finds the heart. In the city, protest began. People stood outside military gates, holding signs with her name. Some called for justice, others called for truth. But one thing was clear. Silence was no longer an option. Jonas met with senior officers trying to spin a new story. She faked the fall, he said. The video was edited. This is enemy propaganda. But someone in the room laughed. A high-ranking official stood up and walked out without a word. Jonas realized in that moment, even his own people were slipping away. Back at the base, Merrick packed his things. He was being transferred for his safety, they said. But he knew the truth. He was being moved so he'd stay quiet. Before he left, he found Daniel one last time. "Do you regret saving her?" Merrick asked. Daniel looked him in the eyes. "No," he said. "I regret not saving her sooner." That night, the base was quiet again. Too quiet. And in that silence, every man who had touched the mission felt the weight of it. Some tried to forget, others tried to bury it. But regret has a long memory, and every whisper of Sophia's name brought the past back louder. They had followed orders. They had obeyed the chain of command. But now the chain was choking them. One by one they were breaking, and far away, the woman they tried to erase was becoming something stronger than a soldier. She was becoming a symbol, not of war but of truth. The city moved like it always did. Traffic horns, blinking screens, and people rushing past each other without a second glance. But deep inside a crowded newsroom, a phone buzzed with a message that made a senior journalist stop breathing for a second. She stared at the screen, eyes wide, hands trembling just slightly. Attached was a photo, blurry, taken from a distance. But the face was clear enough. Sofia Mendez, alive, standing on a dirt path with a scarf around her head and a fire in her eyes. Lara, the journalist, leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. She had spent months chasing the truth about Operation Quiet Wind. She had exposed documents, interviews, recordings, and all leading to a cover-up no one wanted to admit. But this was different. Sofia wasn't just a story anymore. She was walking proof. The photo came with a short message. "She's coming to the capital 3 days from now. She will speak." News spread like electricity through dry air. Reporters started whispering. Agencies began booking cameras. The public, already boiling with anger, now had a face to wait for. They had heard her voice in videos, read her words online, but now, she was real again, back in the mountains. Daniel packed a small bag. He looked at Sofia, who was putting on her shoes slowly, one at a time. Her legs still hurt, but she stood tall. "You don't have to do this," he said gently. "Yes, I do," she replied. "They tried to bury me in silence. Now I will bury their lies in truth." Mateo handed her a walking stick carved with care. His mother gave her a woven scarf, red and gold. "For protection," she said softly, "and for power." Sofia smiled and hugged them both. Her eyes glassy with emotion. She owed them her life. But her mission was calling, and missions have a way of not waiting. The journey to the city was slow. They took side roads, stayed off the radar. Daniel drove, always watching the mirrors. He knew someone would try to stop them. He just didn't know who or when. On the second night, a black SUV appeared behind them, following for 2 hours before disappearing into the fog. On the third day, their hotel room phone rang with no one on the other end. Sofia didn't flinch. "If they wanted to stop me, they should have finished the job," she said. Her voice steady. Meanwhile, at the military base, chaos was quietly unfolding. Jonas had been removed from command, replaced by an officer known for following law more than loyalty. An internal investigation had begun. Blake was still missing. Merrick had officially resigned, and 2 other soldiers had requested lawyers. The command structure was cracking because the one woman they called a threat was now stronger than ever. When Sofia finally entered the city, the sky was overcast, gray, and waiting. She stepped out of the vehicle near the Justice Building. Reporters surrounded her instantly, flashes exploding, microphones shoved forward. But she didn't speak yet. She only walked one step at a time, toward the place where truth was supposed to live. Inside the press hall, chairs were filled, cameras rolling. Lara stood at the podium first, introducing Sofia with just one sentence. "She was supposed to be dead, but here she is." Sofia walked to the microphone, her scarf still covering part of her face. For a moment she said nothing. Then she took a deep breath and removed the scarf. Gasps filled the room. The bruises had faded, but the fire in her eyes had not. "I was thrown from the sky," she said calmly. They called it necessary, they called it classified, but what they really meant was, I saw too much. She told the whole story. The fake rescue, the fall, the pain, the betrayal. She didn't name every person involved, but she gave enough for the world to connect the dots. And then she held up a small object, a radio, scratched and old. This, she said, is the same radio that heard mission complete. But I'm still here. Which means the mission failed. The room exploded with applause. Not loud or wild, but powerful, like thunder rolling over quiet hills. In another building, Jonas watched the live broadcast on a small screen. He sat in silence, fingers twitching. For the first time in years, he looked afraid. Daniel stood at the back of the press room, unseen. He didn't need to be in the spotlight. This was her moment. He only smiled when she spoke the final words. I don't want revenge, she said. I want accountability. And I want peace for the next Sophia they try to silence. That night, her face was everywhere. Newspapers, channels, phones. She wasn't a rumor anymore. She wasn't a voice in static, she was real. And her return wasn't just unexpected, it was unstoppable. The courtroom was silent. Not the kind of silence that feels calm, but the kind that waits. Heavy and sharp, every seat was filled, reporters lined the walls, and cameras stood like statues in the back. Even the air felt nervous. Sophia sat at the front, wearing a plain dark dress, her hands folded on the table. Her face was calm, but her eyes didn't blink much. Next to her sat Laura, the journalist who brought the case to the world, and a small team of lawyers who believed more in truth than in politics. Across the room, Jonas entered in a pressed uniform, medals on his chest, but his steps were slower now, his chin not as high as before. He glanced at Sophia for half a second. She didn't look away. The judge arrived, old and stern. He looked at both sides, then at the crowd. This is not a show, he said. This is justice, and so it began. Sophia's lawyer stood first. Her voice steady, she explained the case. The mission, the fall, the survival. She played the leaked audio. Jonas's voice ordering the mission, calling it a cleanup. Some in the crowd gasped. Others whispered. The judge raised his hand. Silence in the court. Then came the footage. Sophia's own video, made with Mateo's phone, showing her injuries, her recovery, her truth. The room watched without blinking. Sophia's voice, quiet but full of fire, filled the hall. Next, a surprise witness walked in. Marek, the young soldier. He stood in full uniform, but with no weapons, no rank, no fear. He took the stand, looked directly at Jonas and began. I was there, he said. I saw everything. She was told it was a rescue. We lied. We threw her. Gasps again. The judge banged the gavel. Order, Marek continued. I didn't stop it. And I didn't push her, but I watched. And that makes me guilty too, he paused. Breathing heavy, then he looked at Sophia. I'm sorry, he said. I should have spoken sooner. Sophia gave him a small nod. Not forgiveness, not anger. Just truth. Then it was Jonas's turn. He stood slowly, walked to the witness stand, and took a long breath. His lawyer spoke first. Did you give the order to eliminate Sofia Mendez? Jonas shook his head. I gave an order to handle a security threat. I didn't say to kill her. Lara stood up, holding the audio recording. And yet your voice says, don't let her reach the embassy. Make sure she disappears. Jonas clenched his jaw. It was a figure of speech, he said. This has been twisted, Sophia's lawyer stepped in. You knew she discovered the illegal arms routes, didn't you? Jonas stayed silent. You knew she planned to submit evidence to the embassy. Still no answer. The lawyer leaned closer. She wasn't a threat to the country. She was a threat to your secret. Jonas finally looked up, his voice low. She was in the wrong place, asking the wrong questions, that was all he said. But it was enough. The room shifted. People no longer looked at Jonas as a commander. They looked at him as a man who tried to silence a truth he couldn't control. Then Daniel was called. He walked to the stand, dressed in civilian clothes. No medals, no fear, only calm. He spoke gently, but every word landed like a hammer. I flew the mission. I saw her fall. I heard the comm say, mission complete. But later I heard another voice, one that said, "I'm still here." The judge raised an eyebrow. "You believe she survived on her own?" Daniel nodded. "No, sir, she survived because she refused to die." And then it was Sophia's turn. She stood up slowly, walked to the center of the room, and looked at the judge. "No speech, no anger," she said softly. "Just this. I was thrown from a helicopter by people who swore to protect. I broke, I bled, but I lived." She turned toward the audience. "There are others like me, truth-tellers, peace builders. They're marked as threats. Just like I was." Her voice grew louder. "I want justice, not for revenge, but for every person who doesn't survive to tell their side." The judge listened quietly. When she was done, he nodded once. "This court will decide in the coming days," he said. "But know this, violence will no longer protect the guilty." That night, news stations played clips from the hearing. People around the world watched, cried, cheered. The courtroom that day didn't just hold a trial. It held history. And though the final verdict was not yet given, everyone knew something had already changed, because the girl they tried to erase was now the voice of 1,000 others. The courtroom was quiet again. But this time the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt like the deep breath before change. It had been 3 days since the last hearing, and now everyone was back waiting for the final verdict. Sophia sat in the front row wearing white, not for peace, but for the names of all the people who never got their day in court, the ones who disappeared, who were forgotten, who were never found. Daniel sat behind her, his hands folded, his face calm. Marek was there too, not in uniform anymore, but still standing straight. The courtroom was full, the cameras were rolling, and the world was watching. The judge entered slowly, holding a thick folder in his hand. He looked older than before, as if the weight of the truth had added years to his life. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and began, after reviewing all evidence, the audio, the testimony, the flight data, the survivor's account. "This court finds Jonas Reed guilty of conspiracy, attempted murder, abuse of authority, and falsifying military orders." Gasps filled the room. Jonas closed his eyes and said nothing. His hands didn't shake, but his jaw clenched tight. The judge continued. "This court also recommends the opening of multiple new investigations connected to illegal arms operations mentioned during the hearings." More gasps. It was bigger than anyone thought. Sophia had not just brought justice for herself. She had cracked open a system built on silence. The judge turned to Sophia. "You survived something no one should. And instead of hiding, you chose to speak." "This court thanks you." Sophia stood slowly, her eyes filled with quiet tears. She didn't smile. She didn't cheer. She only whispered, "Thank you," and sat down. Reporters rushed to call their editors. Cameras flashed. The guards led Jonas away in handcuffs. He didn't fight. He looked straight ahead. But his shoulders had fallen, not from the weight of the cuffs, but from the truth finally catching up. Outside the courthouse, people waited. Some held candles. Some held signs with Sophia's name. As she walked out the front doors, a sea of people parted to let her pass. Some tried to speak, to thank her, but no one really knew what to say. Sophia stopped for a moment, looked at the crowd. Then she raised the radio in her hand, the same one that once said, "Mission complete." She didn't say a word. She didn't need to, because her silence was her roar. Weeks passed, and the city began to change. Laws were reviewed. Commanders were questioned. Old cases were reopened. People who had once been afraid to speak now stood taller. The system had felt untouchable, but not anymore. Sophia didn't stay in the spotlight. She never liked attention. She moved to a quiet place near the mountains, close to the village where she had been saved. She started a small organization called the Echo Project. It helped whistleblowers, survivors, and truth seekers tell their stories safely. She trained local reporters, taught village girls how to hold cameras. She didn't seek revenge. She built bridges. Sometimes Daniel visited her. They sat by the river, watching the water flow, saying very little. One day he asked, "Do you ever wish it hadn't happened?" Sophia thought for a while, then said, "I wish they had never feared the truth. But I'm glad the truth feared no one." Marek also found his way to the mountains. He helped build homes, taught children how to use radios the right way. He never forgave himself fully, but he worked quietly, planting small seeds of good, hoping they would grow. One rainy afternoon, a package arrived at Sophia's door. Inside was a folded uniform, old and worn. No note, no name, just a medal wrapped inside. A symbol of service returned without pride. She placed the medal on a shelf next to the radio. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Years later, people would still talk about her. Books would be written, documentaries filmed. Some would call her a hero, some would call her a miracle. But those who truly knew her knew she was something else. She was the proof that you can fall from the sky, break your bones, lose your voice, and can still stand taller than the ones who pushed you, because truth doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need power or armies or medals sometimes. Truth only needs one person, to survive, to speak, to never forget. And when that person stands in silence, the world listens. Because sometimes silence is louder than a gunshot. Sometimes silence is justice, sometimes silence is a roar.